I wake to the sound of Emily's meditation app drifting through the thin walls of what used to be my master bedroom. The ethereal chimes and synthesized ocean waves have replaced the gentle breathing of my Martha, gone now 3 years this December. My new room, the former guest bedroom, faces north and never quite gets warm, even with the space heater I bought myself last winter when I realized no one else was going to notice me shivering under thin blankets that smell like mothballs and old disappointments. 6:45 a.m. The red numbers on my alarm clock, the same one Martha bought me for our 20th anniversary, blink steadily. She used to tease me about being too regimented, setting the alarm even on weekends. "Thomas," she'd say, rolling over to face me with sleep-tousled hair and that smile that made 43 years feel like a long weekend. "The world won't end if you sleep until 7. But routine has become my anchor now, the only thing that feels like mine in a house that bears my name on the deed but no longer holds my presence in its daily rhythms. I sit on the edge of the bed, my feet searching for the slippers Emily bought me last Christmas. Sensible brown things with memory foam that's already losing its shape. They were practical, she said, good for an older man who might shuffle. I'd wanted to tell her I'm 65, not 90, and my gait is still steady enough to frame a wall or fix a leaking pipe. But I'd smiled and thanked her because that's what you do when someone gives you a gift that feels more like a gentle shove toward obsolescence. The bathroom mirror reflects a face I'm still getting used to. Retirement aged me faster than 40 years of construction work ever did. My jaw carries more weight now, gravity claiming what muscle used to hold. The gray in my beard, which Martha always said made me look distinguished, now just makes me look tired. I splash cold water on my face, a habit from decades of early job site starts, and listen to the house around me beginning its morning choreography without me. Downstairs, the coffee maker I programmed last night has already finished its work. I bought this particular model because it's quiet, learning months ago that the old percolator Martha and I used for 20 years was too loud for Emily's morning routine. The kitchen, once the heart of our home where Martha would hum while making pancakes on Sunday mornings, now feels more like a service station. Clean, efficient, devoid of the flower handprints on cabinet doors and coffee ring stains that used to mark this space as lived in rather than merely functional. I pour coffee into the blue ceramic mug David made in high school pottery class. It's slightly lopsided, the handle a bit too small for adult hands, but it survived 3 moves in 40-some years. Martha always said we should save it for special occasions, but after she died, I decided every morning I wake up is special enough. The coffee tastes the same as it always has, but drinking it alone changes its chemistry somehow, makes it more bitter despite using the same beans, the same proportions. From my position at the kitchen island, I can see the formal dining room where the mahogany table Martha inherited from her mother sits polished and unused. We only ate there on holidays and when her sister visited from Portland. Now it's covered with Emily's ring lights and camera equipment. She's building her brand, she tells people, though I've never been entirely clear what that brand is beyond photograph smoothie bowls and inspirational quotes overlaid on sunset photos. The dining room has become her studio, and the breakfast nook where Martha and I shared 40 years of morning conversations has been relegated to a charging station for various devices I don't recognize. I check the grocery list I keep in my shirt pocket, written in the careful block letters I've used since my apprenticeship days when legibility on blueprints meant the difference between a secure wall and a costly mistake. Today's items are predictable. Oatmeal, bananas, the organic almond milk Emily prefers, ground turkey because David's trying to eat healthier. I do all the shopping now, another one of those responsibilities that migrated to me gradually, the way water finds the lowest point. At first, it was helping out. Dad, since you're retired and have the time. Became Dad, you're so much better at finding deals. Which eventually became simply expectation without explanation. The morning news plays on the small TV I moved from our bedroom after Martha died. The anchors discuss inflation and housing costs with the kind of detached concern that suggests they've never had to choose between heating bills and prescription medications. I half listen while mentally calculating this month's expenses. Property taxes are due next month. The roof needs attention before winter. David's car needs new tires. Emily's business expenses for her LLC. The numbers pile up like autumn leaves, requiring constant attention to keep from overwhelming everything underneath. I hear movement upstairs, the sound of the shower in what used to be our master bathroom. Emily will be down in 20 minutes precisely for her pre-workout smoothie. David will follow 30 minutes later, grabbing coffee and whatever breakfast I've prepared before leaving for his job at the marketing firm. They move through the morning like dancers who have rehearsed the same routine so many times they no longer need to think about it, and I'm the stagehand who keeps the props organized and the set clean. The back door opens, and I feel the October cold crawl across the kitchen floor. I've been meaning to replace the weather stripping, adding it to the mental list that grows longer each week. From the window, I can see my workshop in the garage, the one place in this property that still feels entirely mine. The tools hang in the same order I established 30 years ago. The workbench bears the scars of countless projects, from David's Pinewood Derby car to the kitchen cabinets I built for Martha's birthday. But I visit it less now, partly because my arthritis makes detailed work more difficult, partly because there's an unspoken understanding that loud noises during Emily's filming schedule are discouraged. Emily appears in the kitchen exactly on schedule, already dressed in expensive workout clothes that coordinate in ways I don't fully understand, but cost more than I used to spend on a month's worth of work shirts. She moves with the purposeful efficiency of someone who has optimized every aspect of her daily routine for maximum productivity. Her smile is bright and professional, the same one she uses in her videos. "Good morning, Thomas," she says, and I notice she started using my full name instead of Dad sometime in the past year. It's a small thing, but small things accumulate weight when you're paying attention. She begins assembling her smoothie with ingredients I bought yesterday at 3 different stores because they needed to be organic, local, and preferably sourced from companies with specific ethical practices I don't fully understand but have learned to recognize by their packaging. "Sleep well?" I ask, though I know the answer. Emily tracks her sleep with a device she wears on her wrist that monitors everything from heart rate to REM cycles. She often shares these statistics during breakfast as if they're weather reports. 7 hours and 23 minutes, she confirms, adding spinach to the blender. Not optimal, but the meditation session this morning should help with cortisol regulation. She speaks the language of wellness fluently, every conversation peppered with terms that make self-care sound like a science project. I nod and continue eating my oatmeal, the same breakfast I've had for 3 years now because it's easy, cheap, and doesn't require much cleanup. David joins us as Emily's blender finishes its violent transformation of vegetables and supplements into something green and supposedly nutritious. My son has inherited my height, but not my build. Where construction work gave me broad shoulders and scarred hands, his office job has softened his frame and made his handshake less certain than I remember. He's a good man, I remind myself, just busy with the demands of his own life. Though sometimes I wonder if busy is just another word for selective attention. "Dad, the upstairs toilet is running again," he says while scrolling through his phone. "Could you take a look at it today?" The request comes casual and automatic, wrapped in the assumption that I have nothing better to do than maintain the house I pay for while they discuss weekend plans that don't include me. "Sure," I say, because that's what I always say. The word has become my default response to requests that aren't really requests so much as gentle orders disguised as favors. I know how to fix the toilet. I've fixed it 5 times in the past 2 years because the chain inside keeps slipping off the hook. $20 for a new mechanism would solve the problem permanently, but suggesting improvements to a house I supposedly still own has become complicated territory. Emily rinses her blender in the sink, a task that takes 30 seconds but somehow requires me to finish it properly after she leaves. Tiny pieces of spinach and protein powder cling to the glass like green snow, and she never seems to notice the residue that requires actual scrubbing to remove. She checks her phone, scrolling through comments on last night's post about gratitude practices and self-love, her face glowing with the particular satisfaction that comes from external validation. "I'm having Rebecca and some of the other influencers over tonight for a collaboration session," Emily announces while gathering her keys and water bottle. "We'll be filming in the living room and dining area, so it would be great if you could maybe stay upstairs or in your room after 7. We need the space to look authentic and uncluttered." The request sits in my chest like indigestion. My living room. My dining room. The spaces Martha and I furnished piece by piece over 40 years, now needing to look authentic by removing any trace of my existence. I want to ask what's authentic about pretending I don't live here, but instead I nod and say, "No problem." David kisses Emily goodbye, a quick peck that suggests routine rather than passion, and grabs his travel mug. "I might be late tonight," he tells her. "Big presentation tomorrow." He waves to me absently, already mentally at the office, and they're both gone, leaving me with the peculiar silence that follows other people's lives. I wash Emily's blender properly, scrubbing away the green film she missed, and start the dishwasher that runs twice a day now instead of once because somehow 2 additional adults create more dishes than Martha and I ever managed in 40 years. The kitchen returns to its sterile calm, ready for the evening when Emily will need it to look perfect for women who will drink kombucha from mason jars and discuss the challenges of maintaining work-life balance while building their personal brands. The toilet upstairs does need attention, so I retrieve my toolbox from the garage and climb the stairs that creak in the same places they've creaked for 20 years. The master bedroom door is open, revealing the space that no longer holds any trace of Martha or me. Emily has redecorated with neutral colors and minimalist furniture that looks like it came from a catalog called Lifestyle Aspirations. Our old family photos have been replaced with abstract art and inspirational quotes in scripted fonts. The bed where David was conceived, where Martha and I weathered flu seasons and arguments and the quiet intimacy of long marriage, now features white linens and decorative pillows that aren't meant for sleeping. The toilet repair takes 15 minutes. Simple fix, like I knew it would be. But as I pack up my tools, I notice Emily's jewelry box sitting on the dresser that used to hold Martha's reading glasses and prescription bottles, and the romance novels she'd never admit to enjoying. The jewelry box is expensive, leather with multiple compartments, and it occurs to me that I bought it. Not directly, but through the math of shared expenses that means my Social Security check and savings help fund the lifestyle that has slowly erased mine. I spend the afternoon in my workshop, ostensibly organizing tools but really just seeking the comfort of a space that still remembers who I used to be. My hands know these tools, can identify a Phillips head screwdriver or needle nose pliers by touch alone. The pegboard where everything hangs in careful order is a map of competence I've built over 40 years of solving problems with my hands and my mind. Here, I'm not the elderly relative who needs gentle management. I'm the man who built this garage, installed the electrical, framed the walls that now shelter people who have forgotten I exist beyond my utility. Martha's garden is visible through the window, though Emily has replaced most of the perennials with ornamental grasses that require less maintenance and photograph better. Martha spent hours out there, her hands dark with soil, talking to plants like they were family friends. She'd bring me tomatoes warm from the vine and herbs for whatever dinner she was planning. Now the space is neat and efficient, beautiful in the way magazine spreads are beautiful, but absent the chaotic joy Martha brought to everything she touched. The afternoon light shifts, painting the garage in golden rectangles that remind me of the workshop my father kept in our basement when I was growing up. He taught me that a man's hands should be useful, that there's dignity in being able to fix what's broken and build what's needed. Those lessons shaped 40 years of employment, enabled me to provide for a family, to buy this house and fill it with furniture Martha chose and memories we made together. But somewhere in the past 3 years, usefulness has become expectation, and dignity has been replaced by invisibility. I returned to the house around 5, knowing Emily will need time to prepare for her evening of collaboration. The living room has been rearranged, furniture moved to create better lighting angles, throw pillows fluffed and positioned with mathematical precision. The coffee table displays a carefully curated selection of books about mindfulness and entrepreneurship, none of which anyone actually reads, but all of which suggest the kind of person Emily wants to appear to be. Dinner is leftover pot roast I made Sunday night, reheated in portions that assume 3 people will eat together like a family. But David calls to say his presentation prep is running late, and Emily explains she needs to eat light before filming because the camera adds weight. So I eat alone at the kitchen counter, same as most nights, while upstairs Emily prepares her face and hair for women who will arrive shortly to discuss authenticity while performing curated versions of themselves. The doorbell rings at 7:30, and I retreat to my room as requested, listening to voices that bubble with the kind of enthusiasm that feels exhausting to witness. Through the thin walls, I hear discussions about engagement rates and sponsored content, and the challenges of maintaining genuine connection with followers while scaling their platforms. They laugh frequently, the sharp laughter of women who are always performing, even for each other. I lie on my bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling I painted 2 years ago when Emily mentioned the room looked dated. The voices downstairs blend into a soundtrack of belonging I'm not part of, and I find myself thinking about Martha's last weeks when she'd lay in our bed, my bed, holding my hand while we watched old movies and talked about everything and nothing. She worried about leaving me alone, made me promise I'd take care of myself, stay connected with David, not let grief turn me into a hermit. But this isn't what she meant. This careful erasure of my presence in my own home, this reduction to function without relationship, this isn't taking care of myself. It's slowly disappearing while still breathing, becoming a ghost who pays the bills and fixes the toilets and stays upstairs when real people need the space to look authentic. The collaboration session ends around 10, car doors slamming in the driveway as the influencers return to their own carefully curated lives. Emily's footsteps on the stairs are light and energized, the sound of someone satisfied with a productive evening. David comes home 20 minutes later, his heavier tread carrying the weight of adult responsibility and whatever stress the presentation preparation has created. I listen to them get ready for bed in the master bedroom, their voices low and comfortable in the way of couples who have developed their own shorthand for daily life. They don't check on me, don't ask about my day or mention the toilet repair I completed. And why would they? I'm the background character in their story, reliable as a household appliance, present when needed and invisible otherwise. Sleep comes slowly, interrupted by the heating system cycling on and off, and the occasional car passing on the street where I've lived longer than most of my neighbors have been alive. I built this house to last, using materials and methods that prioritized longevity over quick profit. The foundation is solid, the frame true, the electrical and plumbing installed to code by my own hands. It's a good house, a strong house, a house that deserves better than being a stage set for people who have forgotten its history. Morning arrives with the same meditation app chimes and the same ritual of coffee and careful navigation around other people's schedules. But something has shifted during the night, some internal mechanism realigning like a compass needle, finding true north. I sit at the kitchen counter with my lopsided blue mug and really look at the space around me. The appliances I researched and purchased, the cabinets I built and installed, The tile floor I laid on my hands and knees over 3 weekends one hot summer while Martha brought me ice water and kissed the top of my sweaty head. This is my house. Not morally or emotionally, but legally and financially. My name on the deed, my credit rating backing the remaining mortgage, my social security payments covering the taxes and utilities and maintenance. Somewhere in the past 3 years, I've allowed the fact of ownership to be obscured by the fiction of convenient arrangement. They moved in temporarily to save money and help me with the loneliness, but temporary has a way of becoming permanent when nobody bothers to define the terms. Emily appears for her smoothie ritual, and I watch her move through the kitchen with the confidence of someone who has never questioned her right to be here. She opens cabinets I installed and retrieves ingredients I purchased without any acknowledgement that this is a privilege rather than an entitlement. Her wellness empire, built on concepts of gratitude and mindfulness, operates with a surprising blindness to the actual mechanics of how her lifestyle is funded and maintained. "The living room looks great after last night," she says while adding protein powder to her blender. "Rebecca said it has really good energy. She might want to do a collaboration here next month too." The statement includes no question, no consideration that next month's plans might involve consulting the person who actually owns the living room. "Did you ask David about that?" I ask, curious if my son is more involved in decisions about my house than I am. "Oh, he's fine with it," Emily responds with the casual certainty of someone who has never had a request denied. "He knows how important my business is." Her business that operates from my dining room and requires my living room and assumes my absence whenever authenticity needs to be performed. David joins us with his familiar distracted energy, scrolling through emails that apparently require immediate attention despite it being barely 7 in the morning. "Hey, Dad," he says without looking up. "The upstairs bathroom faucet is dripping now. Could you grab some washers today when you're out?" The request carries the same automatic assumption as yesterday's toilet repair, and something in my chest tightens like a over-torqued bolt finally reaching its breaking point. "Actually," I say carefully, "I was thinking you might want to handle that one yourself. Good skill to have as a homeowner." David's phone attention shifts to actual attention, and he looks at me with the mild confusion of someone whose expectations have been unexpectedly disrupted. "But you're so much better at that stuff," he says, his tone suggesting this is obvious and rational. "I'd probably just make it worse." "Only one way to learn," I reply, keeping my voice level. Emily has stopped blending and is watching this exchange with the alert interest of someone sensing an unscripted moment that might require management. "Is everything okay, Thomas?" Emily asks, and there's something in her voice that suggests my deviation from expected behavior is being noted and categorized as potentially problematic. "Everything's fine," I say, though we all know that's not quite true. "Just thinking maybe it's time for everyone to be a little more self-sufficient." The comment sits in the kitchen like spilled milk, obvious and requiring cleanup nobody wants to handle. David and Emily exchange the kind of quick glance that passes between people who have learned to communicate about a third party without including them in the conversation. The moment stretches until David's phone buzzes with another urgent email, and Emily's schedule demands she leave for her workout class. They exit with the same choreographed efficiency as always, but the atmosphere has changed subtly, like air pressure before a storm. I'm left with my coffee and the growing certainty that something fundamental needs to shift in the architecture of this arrangement. I spend the morning driving around town instead of heading directly to the hardware store for washers I have no intention of purchasing. The streets hold 40 years of memories. The elementary school where I attended David's baseball games, the grocery store where Martha and I shopped every Saturday morning, the diner where we'd have coffee after church on Sundays. The town has grown and changed, new developments spreading into what used to be farmland, but the core remains familiar. At the library, I use one of the public computers to research something I haven't thought about in years: tenant rights and property law. The information is more complex than I expected, but certain facts emerge clearly. If someone lives in your house for an extended period, contributes to expenses, and receives mail there, they can potentially claim tenancy rights that complicate removal. But if someone lives in your house as a guest, pays no rent, and has no lease agreement, their status is very different. I also research housing costs for two-bedroom apartments in our area, curious what David and Emily would face if they needed to find their own place. The numbers are higher than I expected, enough to explain why temporary arrangements become permanent ones when everybody's comfortable with the current distribution of financial responsibility. The drive home takes me past the bank where I've maintained accounts for 30 years. On impulse, I pull into the parking lot and walk inside, approaching the customer service desk with the deliberate purpose of a man who has decided to understand his own financial situation more clearly. "I'd like to review my account statements and property documentation," I tell the young woman behind the desk. She's polite and efficient, calling up records that confirm what I already knew but haven't considered carefully in months. My name alone on the deed. My name alone on the mortgage account. My Social Security and pension payments covering all housing expenses, with David and Emily's contributions going to groceries and utilities that amount to perhaps 30% of the actual monthly costs. The numbers tell a story I haven't been paying attention to, focused as I've been on day-to-day management rather than long-term implications. David and Emily are saving substantial money by living with me, probably thousands each month compared to renting their own place. Meanwhile, I'm funding their ability to save while reducing my own financial security and social autonomy. I drive home with a folder of documents and a clarity that feels both liberating and slightly terrifying. The house, when I enter it, looks different somehow, as if I'm seeing it through new eyes. The furniture Emily has rearranged for better camera angles. The dining room converted to her studio space. The living room that needs to be available for her business collaborations. The master bedroom that no longer contains any trace of my 40-year marriage. I've been thinking of this as our house where I happen to live, but it's my house where other people happen to live. The distinction seems minor but contains implications that change everything. David comes home around 6, later than usual, carrying stress in his shoulders and the distracted air of someone whose presentation didn't go as well as hoped. He finds me in the kitchen cooking dinner from ingredients I purchased, using cookware I own, in the house I pay for. "How did the presentation go?" I ask, because I'm still his father regardless of how living arrangements have evolved. "Rough," he admits, loosening his tie. "Client wasn't happy with the creative direction. Might need to start over." He slumps into a chair at the breakfast nook, and for a moment he looks like the boy who used to bring me his broken toys to fix, confident that Dad could solve any problem with the right tools and enough patience. "That's hard," I say, and mean it. "You'll figure it out. You always do." I plate dinner for both of us, noting that Emily texted earlier about having dinner plans with her networking group. These absences have become more frequent lately, her social calendar expanding as her business grows. We eat in comfortable quiet for a few minutes before David mentions the bathroom faucet again. "Did you get a chance to pick up those washers?" He asks, the question casual but loaded with expectation. "No," I say simply. "I meant what I said this morning. Time for you to learn some basic maintenance skills." I keep my tone light, but there's something underneath that David picks up on because he sets down his fork and really looks at me. "Dad, are you upset about something?" The question is direct, and I appreciate that he's asking instead of assuming or ignoring. "Not upset," I say carefully. "Just thinking about how things are arranged here and whether they're working for everyone." I pause, choosing words that feel honest without being accusatory. "When you and Emily moved in, it was supposed to be temporary, to help with your finances and my loneliness after Mom died." David nods, waiting for me to continue. "But somewhere along the way, temporary became permanent and I became the maintenance staff for my own house. The words come out more direct than I intended, but they're true, and truth has weight that can't be ignored. "Dad," David starts, but I hold up my hand. "I'm not angry," I continue, "but I'm also not particularly happy. I pay for everything, fix everything, clean up after everyone, and make myself scarce whenever the house needs to look like a home where I don't exist." The sentences pile up like lumber, each one adding weight to the structure I'm building. And I'm starting to wonder if this arrangement is actually helping anyone, or just making life convenient for some people and invisible for others. David sits back in his chair, and I can see him processing this information like data that doesn't fit his existing algorithms. "I didn't realize you felt that way," he says finally. "I don't think you've been paying attention to how I feel about anything," I reply, not unkindly but not softly either. "Which is understandable because you're busy with your own life. But busy isn't the same as blind, and I've been disappearing in my own house for 3 years." The conversation continues for an hour, circling around issues of money and respect and expectations that were never clearly defined. David is genuinely surprised by some of what I tell him, particularly the financial breakdown that shows how much his living situation is subsidized by my income. He's also defensive, pointing out the yard work he does and the times he's helped with home repairs, as if occasional assistance equals partnership. "What do you want us to do?" he asks eventually, and the question suggests he's thinking of this as a problem to be solved rather than a relationship to be renegotiated. "I want you to start acting like adults who live in someone else's house," I say. "Or make arrangements to live in your own house. But I don't want to keep being the invisible man who funds everyone else's lifestyle while disappearing from his own." David promises to talk with Emily, to discuss potential changes, to be more aware of how household responsibilities are distributed. But his promises have the quality of someone agreeing to consider options rather than committing to action, and I realize that conversations alone won't shift patterns that have calcified over 3 years. That night, I sit in my small bedroom and write a letter I don't intend to send, at least not yet. The process of putting thoughts into words helps clarify what I actually want versus what I think I should want. I want my house to feel like my home again. I want relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenient utility. I want to stop apologizing for existing in the space I've worked 40 years to afford. I also want David and Emily to succeed in their own lives, but not at the expense of mine disappearing. There's a difference between helping family and being consumed by them, and I've crossed that line without noticing when it happened. The letter grows to 3 pages, covering everything from specific incidents to larger patterns to potential solutions. Writing it feels like cleaning out a closet that's been accumulating junk for years, necessary work that reveals how much space has been lost to things that don't belong. Emily comes home around 11, her laughter carrying through the walls as she talks on the phone about the networking event and potential collaboration opportunities. Her voice has the energized quality of someone whose evening has been professionally productive, whose business is growing, whose future looks bright with possibility. And I'm happy for her success, genuinely. But I'm also aware that her brightness has been sustained partially by my dimming, and that dynamic has to change. The next morning follows the same routine, but I participate differently. When Emily begins assembling her smoothie, I remain seated with my coffee instead of automatically starting breakfast preparation. When David appears looking for lunch components to take to work, I point toward the refrigerator without getting up to help. Small changes, barely noticeable, but they shift the morning choreography in ways that require other people to step into spaces I usually fill automatically. "Is there any of that pasta salad left?" David asks, rummaging through refrigerator containers. "I don't know," I reply honestly. "I didn't check when I put things away last night." In the past, I would have known exactly what leftovers were available and would have packaged them conveniently for his lunch. Today, he needs to investigate for himself. Emily notices the shift too, though she doesn't comment directly. When her blender components don't automatically appear clean and ready, she has to wash them herself, a task that takes 5 minutes and requires actual attention to complete properly. She performs these small domestic chores with the air of someone temporarily inconvenienced rather than permanently responsible, but she performs them. I spend the day visiting places I haven't been to in months. The senior center where Martha and I used to play bridge, the hardware store where I know everyone's name, the coffee shop downtown where the owner still asks about my wife, and I still don't know how to answer. These errands don't require my presence at home, and my absence creates space for David and Emily to figure out lunch and afternoon schedules without automatic support. When I return in the late afternoon, the house feels different. Nothing dramatic, but small signs suggest that other people have had to make decisions and take actions usually handled by me. Emily's filming equipment has been moved back to make room for actual living, suggesting she couldn't access the living room for her usual afternoon content creation. David's work clothes from yesterday are still in the master bedroom hamper instead of migrated to the washing machine, indicating that laundry is backing up without automatic management. That evening, Emily announces another collaboration session, but this time she phrases it differently. "Thomas, would it be possible for me to use the living room tomorrow night for filming? I know it's an inconvenience, and I really appreciate you being flexible." The request acknowledges that my accommodation is a favor rather than an entitlement, and I appreciate the recognition even as I agree to the arrangement. Small shifts in language reflect larger shifts in understanding, and I note the change as progress. David also approaches household issues differently, mentioning the bathroom faucet but framing it as a project he'll tackle over the weekend rather than a task automatically delegated to me. "I looked up some tutorials online," he says. "Doesn't seem too complicated. Might take me longer than it would take you, but probably good for me to learn." These adjustments feel like the beginning of renegotiation rather than the conclusion, but they suggest awareness that our current arrangement isn't sustainable or fair. I sleep better that night, knowing that I've started a conversation that needed to happen 3 years ago. But conversations and small adjustments aren't always enough to change patterns that serve some people's interests more than others. Over the following days, I noticed the subtle ways that household expectations drift back toward previous norms. David's bathroom repair project gets postponed due to work demands. Emily's filming schedule expands to accommodate a promotional campaign that requires more living room access. My temporary absence from automatic household management gets interpreted as a brief phase rather than a permanent boundary. The turning point comes Friday evening when Emily hosts what she calls a lifestyle party for her influencer network. The event requires extensive house preparation, furniture rearrangement, specialized lighting, food presentation that looks casual but requires hours of careful staging. The party planning assumes my complete absence from all common areas and my invisible management of logistics like parking, noise, and cleanup. I agree to the event because saying no would create conflict I'm not ready for, but I participate differently than I have in previous gatherings. Instead of preparing food and managing setup, I make plans to have dinner at the diner downtown and see a movie I've been wanting to watch. Instead of hiding in my bedroom, I absent myself entirely, leaving David and Emily to handle their own event management. The evening out feels like a small liberation, sitting in a restaurant where the waitress knows my order and asks about my week, where I'm Thomas who built half the commercial buildings in town, rather than Thomas who stays upstairs when real people need the space. The movie is mediocre, but the experience of choosing my own entertainment instead of accommodating other people's schedules feels significant. I return home around 11 to find the lifestyle party still in progress, cars crowding the driveway and street, voices and laughter spilling from the house I pay for but am not welcome in. I park at the corner and wait, not from politeness, but from a growing sense that this situation has crystallized into something unsustainable. The last guests leave around midnight, and I wait another 15 minutes before returning to my own driveway. The house looks like the aftermath of a small tornado. Furniture displaced, dishes covering every surface, decorative objects moved and forgotten. The living room, where Martha and I spent quiet evenings reading and watching old movies, smells like expensive perfume and spilled wine. Emily and David are in the kitchen, giddy with the success of an evening that apparently generated significant social media engagement and potential business connections. They're discussing future events and expanded collaboration opportunities, their voices carrying the excitement of people whose plans are working exactly as intended. "How was your evening?" Emily asks when she notices me, her tone bright but distracted as she continues photographing the party remnants for her social media story. "Fine," I say, looking around at the chaos that will somehow become my responsibility to address. "Looks like your party was successful." "Really successful," she confirms. "Rebecca wants to do something here next month, and I think we might start offering the space for regular influencer meetups. There's real money in hosting, and this house is perfect for it." The words land like cold water. My house is perfect for her business. My living room is valuable real estate for her career. My dining room is professional studio space for her content creation. And I am the absent landlord who provides utilities and cleanup while generating no income from property that belongs to me. "Did you discuss the hosting business with David?" I ask carefully. "Oh yes," Emily responds enthusiastically. "He thinks it's a great way to leverage our space for additional income. Really smart financial planning." Our space. Additional income that won't benefit the person who owns the space. Financial planning that assumes my property as a free business asset. The words accumulate like evidence in a case I'm building against my own situation. I go to bed without helping with cleanup, leaving Emily and David to manage the consequences of their event. From my small bedroom, I listen to them discussing logistics and laughing about inside jokes from the evening, their voices carrying the satisfied exhaustion of people who have worked hard at something they enjoy. But I also hear Emily on the phone with someone, probably Rebecca, making tentative plans for next month's event and discussing how they might optimize the space for better flow and lighting. The conversation treats my house like a venue rather than a home, and I realize that somewhere along the way, that's exactly what it has become for them. Saturday morning arrives with the same meditation app soundtrack, but I break my routine entirely. Instead of coffee and automatic breakfast preparation, I dress in my best shirt and drive to the office of James Murphy, the lawyer who handled Martha's estate and has been our family attorney for 20 years. I don't have an appointment, but Jim has always made time for walk-ins, and some conversations can't wait for convenient scheduling. "Thomas," Jim says when his secretary shows me into his office. "Good to see you. How are you holding up?" He's asked this question every time I've seen him since Martha's funeral, and I've always answered with polite reassurance. Today, I answer honestly. "Not as well as I thought," I tell him, "and I need some advice about property rights and household arrangements." I explain the situation clearly and factually, avoiding emotional language but not hiding the reality of how my living situation has evolved. Jim listens with the careful attention of someone who has heard variations of this story before, taking notes and asking clarifying questions about financial arrangements, verbal agreements, and written documentation. His questions reveal aspects of the situation I haven't considered fully, particularly around tenant rights and the legal implications of long-term guests who contribute to household expenses. "The good news," Jim tells me after reviewing my documents, "is that the house is clearly yours, with no legal claim from David or Emily. The challenging news is that evicting family members can be emotionally and practically complicated, especially if they've established residency patterns." We discuss options ranging from formal rental agreements that would clarify everyone's rights and responsibilities, to gradual transition plans that would give David and Emily time to find alternative housing, to immediate legal notices that would require them to leave within 30 days. Each option carries different implications for family relationships and practical outcomes. What do you want the end result to look like? Jim asks, and it's the right question because it forces me to think beyond the problem toward the solution. I want my house to feel like my home again, I tell him. I want relationships with my son and daughter-in-law that are based on choice rather than convenience, and I want to stop funding other people's lifestyles while my own disappears. Jim nods and drafts a letter that outlines my legal rights as property owner and gives David and Emily 60 days to establish alternative living arrangements. The letter is professionally worded but unmistakably clear about expectations and timeline. He also prepares documents for a formal rental agreement, in case they prefer to stay and pay market-rate rent with clearly defined responsibilities. You don't have to send either of these today, Jim advises. But having the paperwork ready gives you options if conversations don't produce the changes you need. I drive home with the legal documents in my jacket pocket, feeling like I'm carrying tools for a job I don't want to do but can't avoid any longer. The house, when I enter it, looks exactly as I left it. Party remnants waiting for cleanup, my coffee mug abandoned on the counter, the morning routine disrupted by my absence. David and Emily are in the living room, surveying the space with the analytical attention of people planning improvements. They're discussing furniture arrangement and lighting options, their conversation focused on optimizing the room for Emily's business needs rather than considering its function as family living space. "Dad, there you are," David says when he notices me. "We were thinking about maybe rearranging some of the furniture to make better use of the natural light. Emily's business is really taking off, and this space has so much potential." The word potential hangs in the air like an accusation. My living room has potential for Emily's business. My dining room has potential for her studio. My house has potential for their financial benefit, but apparently I don't have potential for anything except invisible maintenance and convenient absence. "Actually," I say carefully, "I've been thinking about some changes too." I sit down in the chair, Martha, and I shared for evening television, claiming space that has somehow become foreign territory in my own home. I spent the morning talking with Jim Murphy about property rights and household arrangements. The mention of our family lawyer shifts the atmosphere immediately. David and Emily exchange glances that suggest this conversation is entering territory they didn't expect and aren't prepared for. "Is everything okay?" Emily asks, her voice carrying the cautious tone of someone who senses that expectations are about to be disrupted. "Everything's fine," I reply, though we all understand that fine and okay are not the same thing. But some things need to change. This arrangement was supposed to be temporary, and it's been 3 years. It was supposed to help everyone, but it's really only helping some people while making others invisible. I speak for 20 minutes, covering everything from financial reality to social isolation to the gradual erosion of my autonomy in my own home. I explain that I'm not angry or vindictive, but I'm also not willing to continue patterns that require me to disappear for other people's convenience. David listens with the careful attention of someone receiving information that challenges his assumptions. Emily listens with the defensive alertness of someone whose comfortable arrangements are being threatened. Both of them interrupt occasionally with explanations and justifications, but I continue talking until I've said everything that needs saying. "So what do you want us to do?" David asks finally, and his question echoes our conversation from earlier in the week. "I want you to decide whether you want to live here as adults who respect property ownership and contribute appropriately, or find your own place where you can make your own decisions," I tell them. "But I don't want to keep being the forgotten man who funds everyone else's lifestyle while having no say in how his own house is used." The conversation continues for another hour, covering practical details and emotional undercurrents, and the complex dynamics of family relationships that aren't working for everyone involved. David and Emily ask questions about timeline and financial expectations, and whether there's room for negotiation on terms. I answer honestly but don't compromise on the fundamental issue. My house needs to feel like my home again, and that requires changes that go beyond small adjustments to current patterns. By evening, we've established a framework for moving forward. David and Emily will spend the weekend deciding whether they want to stay and pay market rate rent with clearly defined household responsibilities, or begin looking for their own place with a 60-day timeline for transition. Either choice is acceptable to me, but the status quo of subsidized living and invisible maintenance is no longer an option. That night I sleep better than I have in months, not because the situation is resolved, but because it's finally being addressed honestly. I've spent 3 years slowly disappearing in my own home, and I've started the process of becoming visible again. Sunday morning breaks clear and cold, October asserting itself with the kind of weather that reminds everyone winter is coming whether they're ready or not. I wake without the alarm, my body finally releasing the tension that has accumulated over months of conversations I needed to have but kept postponing. The house is quiet around me, but it's a different quality of quiet than usual, expectant rather than simply empty. I make coffee in my blue ceramic mug and sit at the kitchen counter where I can see Martha's garden through the window. Emily has maintained it adequately, but it lacks the idiosyncratic touches that made it uniquely Martha's. The mismatched containers where she started seedlings, the hand-lettered plant markers, the sweet pea trellis built from lumber scraps I brought home from job sites. The garden is beautiful now, photogenic in the way that supports Emily's lifestyle brand, but it no longer tells the story of a woman who talked to tomatoes and believed flowers could cure loneliness. David appears first, earlier than his usual weekend routine, already dressed as if he has plans that require leaving the house. His movements carry the careful deliberation of someone who has spent the night thinking through difficult decisions and arrived at conclusions that feel necessary but not particularly comfortable. "Morning, Dad," he says, pouring coffee into the travel mug that usually indicates he's heading somewhere that doesn't include breakfast conversation. But this morning he sits down across from me, wrapping his hands around the mug like it's providing warmth rather than just caffeine. "Emily and I talked until pretty late last night," he begins, and I can see the careful phrasing of someone who has rehearsed this conversation. "About what you said and about what we want to do." He pauses, studying the coffee in his mug as if it contains answers to questions he's still formulating. And I ask, keeping my voice neutral. This is his decision to make, and pressure from me won't produce the kind of resolution that actually solves anything long-term. "We're going to start looking for our own place," he says, the words coming out in a rush as if speaking them quickly will make them easier to say. "Not because we're angry or because we think you're wrong, but because we need to be responsible for our own lives instead of borrowing yours." The answer settles into the space between us like furniture being moved into its proper position. Relief and sadness occupy the same emotional territory. Relief that the conversation has produced clarity, sadness that clarity requires physical separation to achieve. "That's good," I tell him and mean it. "It's time. Past time probably." David nods, still studying his coffee. "We should have done this a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. We got comfortable with an arrangement that was easier for us than for you, and we didn't pay attention to how that was affecting you." His acknowledgement doesn't erase 3 years of gradual invisibility, but it suggests understanding that might make future relationships possible. "When are you thinking?" I ask, focusing on practical details because they're easier to navigate than emotional ones. "Soon as we can find something suitable," David replies. "Maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8, depends on what's available." He pauses, then adds, "We'll pay rent while we're looking. Market rate like you mentioned. It's only fair." The offer of rent payment is appropriate, but it also feels slightly beside the point. This isn't ultimately about money, though money has been part of the problem. It's about respect and autonomy and the right to feel at home in your own house. The rent payment acknowledges those issues without fully addressing them, but it's a step toward recognition. Emily joins us 20 minutes later, already dressed for the gym in coordinated workout clothes that suggest her day includes content creation as well as exercise. She moves through the kitchen with less automatic confidence than usual, pouring her smoothie ingredients with the careful attention of someone who is aware of being observed and evaluated. "David told you about our decision?" she asks, directing the question toward me but not quite making eye contact. "He did," I confirm. "I think it's the right choice for everyone." Emily nods, then surprises me by sitting down instead of immediately departing for her workout routine. "I want you to know I wasn't trying to take over your house," she says, her voice carrying sincerity that feels genuine rather than performed. "I got excited about having space for my business, and I stopped thinking about how that space belonged to someone else." Her apology acknowledges the core issue more directly than I expected, and I appreciate the recognition even as I realize that understanding and intention are different things. Emily may not have intended to colonize my living space, but intention doesn't change the impact of gradually converting my home into her business headquarters. "I appreciate that," I tell her, "and I hope your business continues to succeed, just not in my living room." She laughs, a sound that carries relief as well as embarrassment. "Fair enough. I'll have to figure out how to make other arrangements work." The comment suggests she's already thinking practically about solutions rather than dwelling on problems, and I respect her ability to adapt quickly to changed circumstances. We spend the next hour discussing practical details: timeline for apartment hunting, arrangements for showing the house if they need to use it for rental applications, division of household expenses during the transition period. The conversation is businesslike but not cold, focused on logistics rather than emotions, but not avoiding the reality that emotions have shaped the decisions we're making. After David and Emily leave for their respective weekend activities, I walk through the house with the slow deliberation of someone taking inventory. The living room, still arranged for Emily's filming needs rather than family comfort. The dining room, converted to studio space with equipment that costs more than most people's cars. The master bedroom that no longer contains any trace of my 40-year marriage. The guest bedroom where I've spent 3 years sleeping like a visitor in my own home. In 6 weeks, maybe 8, this will all return to being my space again. The thought carries excitement and trepidation in equal measure. I've gotten used to sharing space and responsibilities, used to the background noise of other people's lives, used to the automatic social interaction that comes from household coordination. Living alone again will require adjustments I haven't considered fully, but it will also mean eating dinner at my own table instead of standing at the kitchen counter. Reading in my own living room instead of hiding in a bedroom that faces north and never gets warm. Using my own bathroom instead of the small powder room downstairs. Sleeping in the bedroom I shared with Martha instead of the guest room that smells like disappointment and careful neutrality. Monday morning arrives with the usual meditation app soundtrack, but Emily's routine is different now, more considerate of shared space and time. She prepares her smoothie quietly, cleans up completely, and mentions her schedule in a way that acknowledges other people might have plans that matter too. David also moves through the morning with more awareness, asking about my day instead of just announcing his own schedule. These small changes suggest that awareness can shift behavior even without immediate changes to living arrangements. David and Emily are still living in my house, but they're beginning to live in it differently, with recognition that courtesy and consideration aren't automatic entitlements but conscious choices that require ongoing attention. The week passes with similar adjustments. Household responsibilities shared more equitably, common areas used more collaboratively, decisions about house management discussed rather than assumed. Emily still films in the dining room, but she asks permission first and cleans up completely afterward. David still expects help with occasional repairs, but he frames requests as favors rather than automatic delegations. By Thursday, I realized that some of the changes I wanted could have been achieved through better communication rather than complete separation. David and Emily are capable of living respectfully in shared space when expectations are clear and accountability is mutual. But I also realized that it took the threat of separation to produce these changes, and that temporary improvement isn't the same as sustainable relationship. Friday afternoon, Emily mentions a house she and David looked at the previous evening, a two-bedroom duplex 15 minutes away with space for a home office that could accommodate her business needs. Her description carries genuine enthusiasm rather than resigned acceptance, suggesting she's beginning to see independent living as opportunity rather than inconvenience. It has this great natural light in what would be my office space, she tells me while cleaning up her filming equipment. And the kitchen is bigger than I expected for the price range. Her excitement about creating her own space reminds me of how I felt 30 years ago when Martha and I bought this house, the satisfaction of having a place that belongs to you completely. That evening, David shows me photos of the duplex on his phone, pointing out features that appeal to him. The garage where he could set up a workshop, the proximity to hiking trails, the neighborhood full of young professionals building careers and families. His enthusiasm is genuine, and I realize that moving out represents growth and independence rather than exile and punishment. The landlord says we could probably move in by December 1st if our application is approved, David tells me. Maybe sooner if the current tenants find something faster. December 1st feels suddenly close, a concrete endpoint to an arrangement that has drifted for 3 years without clear boundaries or timeline. That's exciting, I tell him, and surprise myself by meaning it completely. I want David and Emily to succeed in their own lives, to build something that belongs to them rather than borrowing something that belongs to me. Their success will make future family relationships healthier and more voluntary. That night, I sit in my small bedroom and revise the letter I wrote weeks ago, updating it to reflect current developments and changed circumstances. The letter is no longer a document of frustration and ultimatum, but a record of successful negotiation and mutual respect. I may never send it, but writing it helps me understand how much has changed in such a short time. The following weeks pass quickly, filled with apartment applications and lease negotiations, and the logistics of transitioning two established adults from shared to independent living. I help where I can, providing references, offering advice about rental markets, lending my truck for furniture shopping, but I help as David's father rather than as the automatic solution to all practical problems. Emily's business actually benefits from the transition planning, as she researches studio rental options and networking opportunities that expand her professional connections beyond collaborations in my living room. Her enterprise has grown enough to support independent workspace, and she begins talking about her business plans with the confidence of someone who is building something sustainable rather than borrowing someone else's infrastructure. 3 weeks before their planned move date, David and Emily invite me to dinner at a restaurant downtown, a gesture that feels like celebration rather than obligation. We eat in a place that requires reservations and cloth napkins, and they pay the check with the deliberate pride of people who are managing their own expenses rather than deferring costs to family members. "We wanted to thank you," Emily says over dessert, "for forcing us to grow up." Her words carry humor but also genuine gratitude, recognition that comfortable arrangements aren't always beneficial arrangements. "I wasn't trying to force anything," I reply. "I was just trying to be visible in my own life again." "Well, you succeeded," David says, "and we needed to be pushed. We were getting too comfortable with a situation that wasn't fair to you." His acknowledgement feels complete and honest, the kind of recognition that makes future relationships possible. December 1st arrives gray and cold, typical for Ohio as autumn surrenders to winter. The moving truck appears in my driveway at 8 a.m., driven by 2 men who work with professional efficiency to transfer 3 years' worth of accumulated possessions from my house to David and Emily's duplex across town. I help load furniture and boxes, physical work that feels good after months of emotional labor. Martha's dining room set, which David and Emily bought from me rather than taking, stays behind along with most of the living room furniture I built or selected over 40 years of marriage. The house, as boxes and belongings disappear, begins to look like itself again rather than like a storage facility for other people's lives. By afternoon, the moving truck is gone, and David and Emily make a final walk through the house to collect forgotten items and clean up any remaining traces of their occupancy. Emily's filming equipment is the last to go, her studio setup dismantled and packed into cases that will soon be reassembled in space that belongs to her. "Thank you," David says as he hands me the key to the master bedroom, a gesture that feels ceremonial and significant. "For everything. For letting us stay, for pushing us to leave, for helping us figure out how to be adults." After they drive away, I walk through my house in the growing December darkness, turning on lights in rooms that feel spacious and quiet and entirely mine. The living room, with furniture returned to arrangements that prioritize comfort over camera angles. The dining room, empty of equipment and ready for actual dining. The master bedroom, where I will sleep tonight for the first time in 3 years. I make dinner for one person but sit at the dining room table instead of the kitchen counter, using dishes Martha and I received as wedding gifts and haven't touched since she died. The silence around me is profound but not lonely, the difference between chosen solitude and imposed invisibility. That night, I sleep in my own bed for the first time since Martha died, surrounded by familiar shadows and comfortable temperatures, and the deep quiet of a house that knows who belongs in it. I dream of projects I want to start, the workshop organization I've been postponing, the garden changes I want to make come spring, the room renovations that will reflect my preferences rather than accommodating other people's needs. Morning arrives with winter light streaming through east-facing windows, and I make coffee in my blue ceramic mug while planning a day that belongs entirely to me. The house feels different, not just empty but spacious, not just quiet but peaceful, not just mine but home. I sit at my kitchen counter and begin a new letter, this one to myself, documenting what I've learned about visibility and autonomy and the difference between helping family and disappearing for them. The letter grows into something longer, a record of recovery that might help other men who have found themselves fading in their own lives. Outside, December snow begins to fall, covering the garden where Martha's perennials sleep underground that belongs to me, in a yard surrounding a house where I live alone but not lonely, visible finally in my own life. Home at last in the space I never should have left. The first morning alone feels like waking up after surgery relief mixed with soreness, the healing beginning but tender to the touch. I move through my house with the deliberate attention of someone relearning familiar territory, opening curtains that have been closed for 3 years, adjusting thermostats to my preference rather than someone else's schedule, making breakfast decisions based solely on what I want to eat. The silence has texture now, different from the background noise of other people's routines that I'd grown accustomed to managing around. This quiet belongs to me, shaped by my movements and choices rather than accommodating invisible presences. I drink my coffee from the blue ceramic mug and read the entire newspaper without checking the time or rushing to prepare for anyone else's departure schedule. By noon, I've begun the process of reclaiming space that has been neutral territory for too long. Martha's books, boxed and stored in the basement when Emily redecorated, returned to the bedroom shelves where they belong. The family photos that were replaced with generic inspiration art reclaim their positions on surfaces that remember what they used to hold. Each small restoration feels significant, like replacing pixels in a photograph, until the full image becomes clear again. This is my house becoming my home again, shaped by history and preference rather than by the need to appear unoccupied for other people's convenience. The phone rings around 2, David's voice carrying the slightly uncertain tone of someone navigating new protocols for family communication. "Just wanted to check in," he says. "See how you're settling back in." "Good," I tell him honestly. "Quiet, but good quiet." We talk for 20 minutes about practical things, his impressions of the new neighborhood, Emily's plans for setting up her home office, my projects for the house now that I have unlimited access to all its rooms. The conversation feels different than our kitchen exchanges of the past 3 years, more intentional and less automatic, shaped by choice rather than proximity. David sounds genuinely interested in my answers rather than just fulfilling obligation, and I realize that physical separation might actually improve our emotional connection. "Emily wants to have you over for dinner once we get settled," David mentions before we hang up. "Cook for you for a change, instead of the other way around." The invitation suggests they're thinking of me as a guest to be honored rather than a service provider to be managed, and I appreciate the shift in perspective even as I'm not quite ready to accept the invitation yet. That evening, I cook a meal that serves exactly one person and eat it at the dining room table with cloth napkins and the good dishes, treating myself with the care I've been extending to others for 3 years. The dining room, free of filming equipment and business calls, feels like a room designed for actual dining again. After dinner, I sit in my living room chair, Martha's and mine, not the neutral furniture Emily preferred for better camera angles, and read a book I've been wanting to finish for months. The room around me holds 40 years of shared decisions and accumulated comfort, no longer staged for appearance, but arranged for actual living. The book is one Martha would have enjoyed, a biography of a woman architect who designed houses that prioritized inhabitant comfort over external impression. I read until late, staying up past my usual bedtime because I can, because there's no meditation app scheduled to accommodate or early workout routine to avoid disrupting. Sleep comes easily in my own bed, in my own room, with familiar shadows and comfortable temperatures, and the deep satisfaction of being exactly where I belong. I dream of spring projects. The garden I'll restore to Martha's idiosyncratic style, the workshop I'll reorganize for actual use rather than storage, the rooms I'll paint colors I choose rather than colors that photograph well. December passes with the steady accumulation of small reclaimed privileges. Morning coffee that lasts as long as I want it to, television programs chosen for my interest rather than background noise requirements, bathroom time that doesn't coordinate with anyone else's schedule. Each day reinforces the difference between sharing space respectfully and disappearing in space that belongs to you. I also rediscover the pleasure of unexpected visitors and spontaneous plans, freedoms that require your house to be available for your own use rather than constantly reserved for other people's activities. When my neighbor Bob stops by with questions about his deck repair, we can sit in my living room and spread blueprints across my coffee table without checking anyone's filming schedule or clearing permission for noise levels. "House feels different," Bob observes while reviewing structural plans. "More like it used to when Martha was alive." His comment suggests that other people noticed the changes too, that my gradual disappearance was visible to neighbors who remembered when this felt like my home rather than my accommodation. Christmas approaches with decisions I haven't had to make in 3 years. How to decorate space that belongs entirely to me, whether to host family dinner or accept David and Emily's invitation to their new place. How to honor Martha's memory while creating new traditions that fit my current life. I choose to put up the tree Martha, and I collected ornaments for over 40 years, decorations that tell the story of our marriage through handmade crafts and travel souvenirs and gifts from David's childhood. The tree goes in the living room corner where it belongs, not moved to accommodate filming equipment or arranged for optimal photography angles. David and Emily invite me for Christmas dinner, and I accept because the invitation feels genuine rather than obligatory. Their duplex, when I arrive, reflects their personalities and choices in ways my house never could while it was simultaneously theirs and mine. Emily's office space showcases her business success without overwhelming the common areas. David's workshop corner contains tools arranged with the pride of someone building his own capability rather than depending on someone else's expertise. This feels right, I tell them as we sit around their table, eating dinner they prepared in their kitchen, celebrating in space that belongs to them completely. You've built something good here. The evening passes with comfortable conversation and genuine laughter, family time that feels chosen rather than defaulted to by shared address. When I leave, David and Emily walk me to my truck with the attentiveness of hosts rather than the distracted efficiency of people managing household logistics. "Thank you for pushing us to do this," Emily says as I prepare to drive home. "I didn't realize how much we needed our own space until we had it." Winter deepens with projects that fill my days and satisfy my need for productive work. I reorganize the garage workshop, building better storage systems and improving lighting for detail work. I research garden renovation plans, preparing for spring changes that will honor Martha's memory while reflecting my current preferences. I also write, filling a notebook with observations about visibility and autonomy, and the gradual ways people can disappear in their own lives. The writing clarifies my thinking and provides perspective on experiences that felt overwhelming while I was living through them, but make sense now that I can observe them from a distance. January brings an unexpected visit from Jim Murphy, my lawyer, who stops by to check on how the family situation has resolved. "You look different," he observes while we drink coffee in my kitchen. "More settled, more present." "I feel more present," I agree. "Amazing how much energy it takes to be invisible in your own house. I didn't realize how tired I was until I stopped being tired." Jim nods with the understanding of someone who has seen similar family dynamics play out in other households. "It's common," he tells me, "especially with older adults who want to help family but end up helping themselves right out of their own lives." His comment reminds me that my experience isn't unique, that other people have navigated similar challenges with varying degrees of success. I ask if he knows of support groups or resources for people dealing with family boundary issues, thinking that my own healing might inform helping others. "Actually," Jim says, "the Senior Center has been looking for someone to facilitate discussions about family relationships and housing arrangements. Your experience might be valuable to other people facing similar decisions." The suggestion intrigues me. I've always been better with my hands than with talking, more comfortable solving practical problems than emotional ones. But 3 years of gradual disappearance followed by successful reclamation has taught me things that might help other people who are losing themselves in family arrangements that serve everyone except them. February arrives with inquiries from the Senior Center about leading monthly discussions on family dynamics and boundary setting for older adults. The idea of sharing my experience feels both intimidating and purposeful, a way to transform personal healing into community resource. I agree to facilitate one session, planning to focus on practical strategies rather than therapeutic processing, tools for recognizing and addressing the gradual erosion of autonomy that can happen when family helping becomes family disappearing. The first session draws 12 people, mostly men in their 60s and 70s, dealing with various forms of family arrangements that started helpful and became problematic. Their stories echo mine in surprising ways. Children who moved back home temporarily and stayed permanently, grandchildren whose childcare needs consumed grandparents' autonomy, spouses whose illnesses created care arrangements that outlasted the medical requirements. "I feel like a stranger in my own house," says Robert, whose daughter and grandchildren have lived with him for 5 years in an arrangement that was supposed to last 6 months. "I can't even watch TV in my own living room because it might wake the kids." His experience resonates with several other participants, And I realize that my story isn't unusual, but part of a larger pattern of older adults whose generosity gradually transforms into invisibility in their own homes. We spend 2 hours sharing experiences and brainstorming strategies for reclaiming autonomy without destroying family relationships. The conversation reveals that most people understand what needs to change but feel guilty about asserting their own needs in situations where they're helping family members. It's not selfish to want to be visible in your own life, I tell them, words that feel true because I've lived both sides of the experience. And it's not helpful to anyone if your generosity requires you to disappear. The session ends with people exchanging contact information and making plans to meet informally between official meetings. Several participants mention feeling less alone after discovering that their experiences aren't unique or shameful, but common challenges that many people navigate successfully. March brings the second session, with attendance increased to 18 people and a waiting list for future meetings. Word has spread through the senior community about a space where people can discuss family boundary issues without judgment or pressure to maintain peace at the expense of personal well-being. I've developed a more structured approach to the discussions, focusing on practical exercises that help people identify their own needs and communicate them clearly without guilt or apology. We practice phrases like, "I need to think about that," and "that doesn't work for me," simple words that feel revolutionary to people who have spent years automatically accommodating everyone else's preferences. "I told my son he needed to start paying rent or find his own place," reports Margaret, whose 35-year-old son has lived in her basement for 3 years. "He was shocked, but he also respected the boundary once I said it clearly." Her success encourages others to share their own progress reports. Children who have found alternative housing, grandparents who have negotiated reasonable childcare boundaries, adult children who have learned to solve their own problems instead of automatically deferring to parental rescue. The meetings have become something I look forward to, a purpose that grows out of personal experience but extends beyond individual healing. I'm using skills I developed in 40 years of construction work: problem solving, practical planning, clear communication to help people rebuild boundaries that have been eroded by well-intentioned family arrangements. Spring arrives with daffodils pushing through soil that belongs to me, in a garden I'm free to modify according to my own vision of how Martha's legacy should evolve. I spend weekends restoring beds that were simplified for easier maintenance, adding back the idiosyncratic touches that made this space uniquely hers, while incorporating changes that reflect my own preferences. David and Emily visit occasionally, comfortable now with their role as guests rather than residents, appreciative of hospitality rather than entitled to accommodation. Emily's business has flourished in her own space, and she speaks about her work with the confidence of someone who has built something independently rather than borrowed someone else's infrastructure. "I should have moved out sooner," she admits during a Sunday afternoon visit. "I got too comfortable using your space instead of creating my own." Her acknowledgement feels complete and genuine, recognition that comfort and fairness aren't always the same thing, that what works for some people in a family arrangement might not work for everyone. Summer brings the 1-year anniversary of David and Emily's move, marked not by celebration, but by the quiet satisfaction of sustainable change. Our family relationships have improved rather than deteriorated with physical separation, built now on choice rather than proximity, mutual respect rather than convenient assumption. I've continued facilitating the monthly support meetings, which have grown to require a larger room and a waiting list for new participants. The sessions have evolved beyond complaint sessions into practical workshops where people develop skills for asserting their needs and maintaining family relationships that serve everyone involved. "You've found your calling," Jim Murphy observes during one of his periodic check-ins. "Helping other people navigate family dynamics seems to suit you." His comment surprises me because I've never thought of this work as a calling so much as a natural extension of problem-solving skills applied to human relationships rather than construction projects. But there's satisfaction in helping people rebuild boundaries that have been eroded, in seeing older adults reclaim visibility in their own lives. Fall returns with colors that remind me of the October when I finally recognized that something fundamental needed to change in my living situation. The anniversary passes quietly, marked not by drama, but by the steady accumulation of small freedoms that add up to a life that feels entirely mine again. I sit in my living room chair on a Friday evening, reading by lamplight while October wind moves through trees I planted 30 years ago. The house around me holds 43 years of marriage and 3 years of gradual disappearance and 1 year of successful reclamation. All of it shapes who I am now. Thomas, who built this house and filled it with family and lost his wife and nearly lost himself and found his way back to visibility in his own life. The phone rings, David's voice carrying excitement about a promotion at work and plans for a vacation that Emily's business success makes possible. We talk for 30 minutes about his achievements and my projects and family news that connects us across the distance between our separate homes. After we hang up, I return to my book and my comfortable chair and the deep satisfaction of being exactly where I belong. Tomorrow I'll facilitate another support group meeting, helping other people navigate the complex territory between family generosity and personal invisibility. Tonight, I'll read as late as I want in my own living room, visible at last in my own life, home finally in the space I never should have left. The story of my reclamation isn't dramatic or heroic, just the quiet insistence that visibility matters, that autonomy isn't selfish, that home should feel like home to the person who owns it. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stop disappearing for other people's convenience and stand up for his own right to exist fully in his own life. The space around me holds all of this now: loss and recovery, generosity and boundaries, family love that doesn't require personal erasure. Outside, winter approaches with the promise of seasons that will cycle through familiar patterns while I remain visible, present, and home.